Hello, everybody. All right, so let's go ahead and just jump into scene 4. So, background on scene 3: Romeo and has talked to Friar Lawrence. Friar Lawrence is going to help Romeo. He's going to agree to marry he and Juliet so that he can bring the two houses together. That's going to take us into scene 4. This is later that day, not too awful long later that day, but this is still that Monday morning. We've been about a day into the play. Our play started on Sunday morning. Now we're at Monday morning. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we've got. All right, so this is on the street, and in come Benvolio and Mercutio. Where the devil should this Romeo be? Came he not home tonight? So it's like, where's Romeo? His father's. I spoke with his man. He's like, he didn't go to his dad's house. I asked a servant. Why, that same pale-hearted wench, that Rosaline, tempts him so that he will surely run mad. So it's like, that Rosaline's got him so like upset and tormented that it's going to run him crazy. Benvolio says, Tybalt, the kinsman to old Capulet, hath sent a letter to his father's house. There's like, yeah, not only that, Tybalt sent a letter to Romeo's house. Mercutio says, a challenge on my life. He's like, I bet my life that it's a challenge. Tybalt wants a fight. Benvolio says, Romeo will answer it. He's like, don't worry, if it's a challenge, Romeo will answer it. Benvolio says, any man that can write may answer a letter. He's like, oh, he'll answer the letter, not the challenge. Benvolio says, nay, he'll answer the letter's master, how he dares, being dared. So he's like, no, he's not just going to answer the letter, he's going to answer the master. He's going to write a letter back to Tybalt saying that he accepts the challenge. Mercutio says, alas, poor Romeo. He's already dead, stabbed with a white wench's black eye, shot through the ear with a love song, the very pin of his heart cleft by the blind bow-boy's butt shaft. And is he a man to encounter Tybalt? So he's like, oh, Romeo, he's already dead. He's been stabbed by a white girl's black eye. He's been cut through his ear with a love song. And his heart has been stabbed by Cupid's arrow. He's not man enough right now to fight Tybalt. Benvolio says, why? What is Tybalt? And Mercutio says, more than Prince of Cats. Now, the Prince of Cats thing. So if we look here, the Prince of Cats is a figure from medieval lore whose first name is also Tybalt. So essentially, this is a character. Granted, they didn't have like cartoons and comic books and stuff back then, but almost think about it like Tybalt is a comic book character, a cartoon character. And he's like the Prince of Cats. So since he shares the name, that's what he's called here a few times. Mercutio later calls Tybalt this to his face. So he's the courageous captain of compliments. He fights as you sing prick song, keeps time, distance, and proportion. He rests his minim rests, 1, 2, and the third in your bosom, the very butcher of a silk button, a duelist, a gentleman of the very first house of the first and second cause. Ah, the immortal Passato, the punto reverso, the high. So he's going through things and he's like, he does everything by the book. He fights like you sing at a recital. He pays attention to the time, the distance, the proportion. He takes the proper breaks. He takes his rests. So he'll rest 1, 2 seconds, the third second he stabs you in the heart. He can hit like the butcher of a silk button. So he's so good he can cut the buttons off of your shirt. He's a duelist. So this is somebody who fights a lot. He duels a lot. And When he goes the passato, the punto reverso, he's listing fencing terms in Italian. So fencing, of course, being sword fighting. So he's paying Tybalt a compliment, even though he doesn't like Tybalt. Tybalt is a very celebrated fighter. He's also a very show-offy fighter. So Benvolio says, the what? He's like, he doesn't know what Mercutio's talking about. So Mercutio starts seeing, like, they go through, they see Romeo come in. And Benvolio says, here comes Romeo, here comes Romeo. And Mercutio says, without his roe, like a dried herring, oh flesh, flesh, how art thou fishified? Now he is for the numbers that Petrarch flowed in. Laura to his lady was but a kitchen wench. Mary, she had a better love to be rhymer. Dido a dowdy, Cleopatra a gypsy, Helen and Hero hidlings and harlots. Thisbe a grey eye or so, but not for purpose. Signor Romeo, bonjour. There's a French salutation to your French slop. You gave us the counterfeit fairly last night. So he's coming in, he's like, oh, it's Romeo. He's skinny, he's dried out, he hasn't got his girl. And he starts poking fun at him. He says, now is he for the numbers that Petrarch flowed in. Petrarch was a poet. So he's like, now he's going to start writing love poetry. And all these ladies from the past, so Cleopatra, Helen of Troy, all these people, it's like they're nothing compared to the woman that Romeo is going to talk about. Then he gives, he calls him Signor Romeo, and he says bonjour. He says there's a French salutation to your French slop. He's kind of making fun of him. The translation that we get over here is there's a French greeting that matches your French pants. He says you gave us the counterfeit fairly last night. He's like, you gave us the, like, you faked us out pretty well last night, didn't you? Romeo says, good morrow to you both. What counterfeit did I give you? He's like, what do you mean I faked you out? Mercutio goes, the slip, sir, the slip. Can you not conceive? He's like, you gave us the slip. Like, you slipped out on us. You ran away, because that was the scene 1 of Act 2, is Romeo running away. Romeo says, pardon, good Mercutio, my business was great, and in such a case as mine, a man may strain courtesy. So he's like, sorry, I had important business to deal with, and honestly, when that happens, it was so important, I had to not pay attention to manners. And Mercutio says, that's as much as to say, such a case as yours constrains a man to bow in the hands. So if we look here, in other words, important business made you flex your buttocks, the bow in the hands. So Mercutio is basically saying, oh, so a case like yours basically meant that you had to go take care of sexual business. And, Romeo says, meaning to curtsy, curtsy being to bend down and like bow. So he's kind of playing off that. And Mercutio says, thou hast most kindly hit it. He says, you've hit the target, sir. So again, he's like, oh, so I did, a curtsy. I did a courteous thing. He's like, oh, you hit it. You've hit the mark. But, think of hit it as, a more derogatory term. So Romeo says, a most courteous exposition. So he's like, well, that's a very polite explanation. And Mercutio says, nay, I am the very pink of courtesy. So he's like, I'm a pink flower of courtesy. And Romeo says, pink for flower. And as we get our translation, the pink flower, again, a reference to sex. This one meaning like the female Mercutio, right. So they're, playing off of here. And then he says, why? Then is my pump well flowered? Well, he's like, so pump also being shoe, but pump also, he's saying, another word for his own parts. So he's like, well, if that's the case, then my pump is well flowered. He's like, you know, so Mercutio, sure wit, follow me this jest now till thou hast worn out thy pump, when that single soul of it is worn, and just may remain after wearing solely singular. So he's like, all right, my witty friend, the joke is worn out your pump, being shoes. Like you've walked that joke, this line of jokes, we've walked it so long that you've done worn your shoes out. Its thin skin is all worn out. So the joke is all you've got left. And Romeo says, oh, single-souled jest, solely singular for the singleness. So making fun of the word soul, making fun with the word single again. He's just making fun of it. And Mercutio says, come between us, good Benvolio, my wit faints. He's like, Benvolio, come get in between us. I'm losing this duel of our wits. And Romeo says, switching spurs, or I'll cry a match. He's like, keep going it up, or I'm going to say that I've won this. And Mercutio says, nay, if our wits won the wild goose chase, I am done. For thou hast more of the wild goose in one of thy wits than, I am sure, I have in my whole 5. Was I with you there for the goose? So he's like, nah, if we keep going on this wild goose chase with our jokes, I'm finished because you've got more of a wild goose in one of your jokes than I have in 5 of mine. He's basically saying like, nah, you're better at this than me. And he goes, was I even with you in the chase for the goose? He's like, was I even close in competing? Romeo says, thou wast never with me for anything when thou wast not there for the goose. So he's like, you weren't with me for anything if you weren't there for the goose. So Romeo's kind of, like it says here, Romeo's implying that Mercutio's only good for jokes. Again, Mercutio's a comedic character. I mentioned it earlier in one of my other videos that Mercutio is a comic relief character. So he's kind of saying, like, you're not good for anything if you're not good for the jokes. Mercutio says, I'll bite thee by the ear for that jest. He's like, I'll bite you on the ear for making that joke. Romeo says, nay, good goose, bite not. Mercutio says, thy wit is a very bitter sweeting. It is a much sharp sauce. He's like, your jokes are like a bitter apple. Or, Well, is it not well served into a sweet goose? He's like, this isn't a good sauce for a goose? Anyway, it's all going on. I'm not going to continue reading the thing because the jokes kind of run thin. But just take it as they're going at each other for a good while. So, let's see. So they keep joking. In comes the nurse and Peter. We've met Peter before. He's the Capulet servant. So Romeo says, here's goodly gear. He's like, oh, here's something good. Benvolio shouting, Caesar goes, a sail, a sail. So Benvolio makes a cry of a sailor who spots another ship on the horizon because the nurse is fat and silly looking. The nurse is big. She's wearing these big clothes. I'll see if I can find a video and post it up of the, actually, give me just a second. All right, so I found a video of this scene from an older movie that's going to kind of help let you see a little bit more of what I'm talking about.
And meant indeed to occupy the argument no longer.
So as you can see here, she comes in and she's got this big old like train behind her.
Here's a fine barge. A sail. A sail. A sail. Two. A shirt and a smile.
Peter?
Oh, no.
Peter?
Good Peter, to hide her face, for her fan's the fairer of the two.
Good morrow, gentlemen.
Dodgy good eve, fair gentlewoman.
Is it good enough, pray?
Well, to no less, I tell you, for the bawdy hand of the dial is now upon the frick of noon.
Out upon you. What a man are you?
One gentlewoman that God hath made himself to mar.
Well, I might suppose it is well said, for himself to mark with art. Gentlemen, can any of you tell me where I may find young Romeo?
I am the youngest of that name, for fault of the worse.
If you be he, sir, I desire some conference with you.
Of course, she'll invite me to some supper. A ball! A ball!
So, a little bit of that scene there. And so you kind of see where he does the sail. And Mercutio says, two of them, a shirt and a smock. So he's like, no, there's two of them. There's, the shirt, a man and a woman. So the nurse hollers at Peter. Peter says, I'm coming. And the nurse says, my fan, Peter. Give me my fan. And Mercutio says, good, Peter, to hide her face, for her fan's the fairer of the face. So he's like, yes, please give her fan to hide her face with, because the fan looks better than her face. And the nurse says, God ye good morrow, gentlemen. She's like, good morning, gentlemen. And Mercutio says, God ye good in, fair gentlemen. He's like, oh no, not good morning, good afternoon. And the nurse, is it good in? Is it afternoon? 'Tis no less, I tell you, for the bawdy hand of the dial is now upon the prick of noon. So this scene, a lot of it's got Mercutio and the nurse going back at each other with a lot of sexual jokes. He's like, oh yes, the hand on the clock is standing straight up. And the nurse, like, I love the movie version that I just showed you, because the nurse laughs at it and remembers she shouldn't laugh at it. Like, she found it really funny. But then it's like, oh no, I should be mad at this. So she says, out upon you, what a man are you? She's like, get out of here, what kind of man are you? And Mercutio says, one gentlewoman that God hath made himself to mar. So it's like, I'm a man that God himself made to ruin. And, I swear you speak the truth. Gentlemen, can any of you tell me where I may find the young Romeo? And Romeo says, I can tell you, but young Romeo will be older when you have found him than he was when you saw him. I am the youngest of that name, for fault of a worse. So he's like, I'll tell you who young Romeo is, but honestly, young Romeo will be older when you find him than he was when you started looking for him. I'm the younger of the name. I'm the youngest of that name, because I don't know of anybody else. And the nurse says, you say well, you speak well. And he's like, oh, you said that very nicely. And of course he did. He's making fun of her. Because Romeo at the moment doesn't know who this is. So, nurse says, if you be he, sir, I desire some confidence with you. So she's like, if you're Romeo, I'd like to have confidence with you. She's meaning to say conference. And the joke is what's called, as we read here, what's called a malapropism. It's where the right word is replaced by a similar sounding word with a completely different meaning. So she's supposed to say conference, she says confidence. So she messes up the word. And Benvolio makes fun of her. Goes, she'll indict him to some supper. So instead of saying invite, she says indict. Or Benvolio says indict to make fun. And Mercutio says, make some jokes. I'm not going to go into a lot of the joke here. Actually, let me see about the video, because I think it goes into this joke here. So, we go through there and see that he's making fun of her, um, all this stuff. Finally runs him off. Like Mercutio finally gets run off. Before he goes, he asks Romeo, he goes, "Will you come to your father's? We'll to dinner thither." So he's like, "Are you going to come to your dad's for lunch? Let's go there." Romeo says, "I'll follow you." It's like, "I've got business to take care of." Mercutio, of course, saying goodbye is like, "Farewell, ancient lady, farewell." So he's like, goodbye, says goodbye to her. He's singing a song. Romeo or Mercutio and Benvolio finally leave. So, the nurse asked him, "I pray you, sir, what saucy merchant was that so full of his ropery?" So it's like, who was the foul-mouthed idiot that is so full of his own crude jokes? Romeo says, "A gentleman, nurse, that loves to hear himself talk, and will speak more in a minute than he will stand to in a month." So, she's like, it's a man who loves to hear himself talk, and he'll say more in 1 minute than he actually means in a month. And, the nurse and them kind of go through here. This is where you had him, he's yelling at him. Or the nurse is yelling at him. And he speak anything against me, I'll take him down. And he were lustier than he is of 20 such jacks. And if I cannot, I'll find those that shall. Scurvy name. I'm none of his flirt gills. I'm none of his skeins mates. What you're saying there is like, I'm not one of his, girls. I'm not one of his punk friends. Blah, blah, blah. So down here, she finally talks to Romeo. "Pray you, sir, a word. And as I told you, my young lady bid me inquire you out. What she bade me say, I'll keep to myself. But first let me tell you, if you should lead her into a fool's paradise, as they say, it were a very gross kind of behavior, as they say. For the gentlewoman is young, and therefore if you should deal double with her, truly it were an ill thing to be offered to any gentlewoman, and very weak dealing." So she's like, "I'm carrying a word to you from my lady," of course, Juliet. "And before I tell you what she said, let me tell you this. If you're leading her into a fool's paradise, as the saying goes, it would be an outrageous crime. It would be terrible if you're just doing this to trick her. It'd be a very evil thing and very bad behavior." So Romeo says, "Nurse, commend me to thy lady and mistress. I protest unto thee." So he starts talking. He's like, "Give my regards to your lady." He's like, "I swear to you." And the nurse is still talking. "Good heart and I faith, I'll tell her as much. Lord, Lord, she shall be a joyful woman." So it's like, she's already like, "Oh, I'll tell her. She's going to be so happy. You have a good heart." And Romeo's, "What will you tell her, nurse? Thou dost not mark me." And he's like, "I haven't even said anything. What are you going to tell her?" Nurse says, "I will tell her, sir, that you do protest, which, as I take it, is a gentlemanlike offer." So the nurse is still messing the words up. She's protesting. Or Romeo says up here, "I protest on you." It's like, "I swear to you." And she's like, "Oh, I'll tell her that you protest," when she means to say propose. So she's messing it up. Romeo says, "Bid her devise some means to come to Shrift this afternoon, and there she shall at Friar Lawrence's cell be shrived and married." So it's like, tell her to get a plan, come up with a plan, devise a plan to come to confession, to get out of the house, go to church, and come to confession. This being this time, them being in Italy, they would have been Catholics. So they would have confessed their sins. So tell her to make up a reason to get out of the house. Tell them that she's got to go to the church to go to confession. And there at Friar Lawrence's cell, she'll give confession and she'll be married. And Romeo gives her some coins and says, "Here's for thy pains." It's like, here's your reward for your efforts. She says, "No, truly, sir, not a penny." She's like, "No, no, no, I can't take it." Romeo says, "Go to us, so you shall." He's like, "No, no, no, go ahead. I mean it." So she takes the money. "This afternoon, sir?" "Well, she shall be there." She was like, "This afternoon? Awesome, she'll be there." "And stay, good nurse. Behind the abbey wall, within this hour, my man shall be with thee and bring thee cords made like a tackled stair, which to the high top gallant of my joy must be my convoy in the secret night. Farewell, be trusty, and I quit thy pains. Farewell, commend me to thy mistress." So he says, "Go over here, go behind the church, and within the hour, somebody's going to come up to you and give you a rope ladder. You need to take that rope ladder, take it back to Juliet, because that's what I'm going to use to climb up into her room tonight." So tells her goodbye, so on and so forth. Nurse says, "Now God in heaven bless thee, hark you, sir." So she's like, "Listen, what sayst thou, my dear nurse? Is your man secret? Did you ne'er hear say, two may keep counsel, putting one away?" And Romeo says, "Warrant thee, my man's as true as steel." So she's like, "Haven't you ever heard that? Is your man like trustworthy? Can he keep a secret? The man is going to give me the ladder. Because haven't you ever heard that two people can keep a secret if you kill one of them?" And Romeo says, "Don't worry about it. My man's as true as steel. My man's trustworthy." Nurse says, "Well, sir, my mistress is the sweetest lady. Lord, Lord, when 'twas a little prating thing. Oh, there's a nobleman in town, one Paris, that would fain lay knife abroad, but she, good soul, had as lief to see a toad, a very toad, as to see him. I anger her sometimes and tell her that Paris is the properer man, but I'll warrant you, when I say so, she looks as pale as any cloud in the reversal world. Doth not Rosemary and Romeo begin with the same letter?" So she starts talking and she's like, "I'm just going to tell you, there's a nobleman in town, Paris, and he wants to marry her. But Juliet would rather look at a frog, look at a toad than him. And I make her angry when I tell her that Paris is better looking and the better choice. But I swear she turns as white as a sheet when I say so." So, go on, just some silly jokes here. Romeo finally says, "Commend me to thy lady." He's like, "Give my compliments to your lady," trying to get rid of her. She says, "Hey, 1,000 times. Peter." Peter says, "Anon, I'm ready." And the nurse says, "Before and apace." It's like, "Go ahead and go quickly." And everybody passes. So that takes us out of scene 4. We've got the plan. Juliet's to figure out a way to get out of the house, to go to the church. There he can get, or she can get married to Romeo by Friar Lawrence. So, for your assignment, here we are, Act 2, Scenes 3 and 4. Both of these videos, you watch them to work on this, fill some things out. We talked here, I mentioned this in Scene 3, what's notable about the rhyme. I answered that for you perfectly. What is Mercutio? How does he feel about Tybalt? Give me 3 words to describe Mercutio. Let's see, put a symbol here to kind of sum up scene 4. What if Friar Lawrence had a Twitter? Go ahead and give me something there. So answer your questions, turn this in, and I'll be back in the next video with scenes 5 and 6, and we'll wrap up Act 2. I just put a thing on Classroom. I don't think anybody's watching these like as they come out, but if you do watch this before Thursday the 16th of April at noon that day, I'm going to be on either Classroom or Google Hangouts or Zoom. I haven't decided which. I'll send it out earlier that day at about 11 or 11:30. And if you have any questions, comment, get on here and ask them to me. I'll have, as many people as want to join can be in it. If you have any other questions, contact me at kdalton@gilesk12.net. And everybody stay safe. I'll see you in the next video.